Hello, everyone. Welcome to Online Seller UK podcast. My name is Prabhat, founder at Online Seller UK, and today we'll be taking a look at and discussing about the state of Amazon vendor negotiations. So, I'm joined by Martin, founder of Consult Groups, and an experienced Amazon vendor manager as well. So, yeah, we've done several podcasts before, and I'm grateful he's back again with us. So, welcome to our podcast, Martin.
Hi, Prabhat. Yeah, thanks for having me back. I'm really excited and I look forward to our conversation today.
Excellent. So I think it's good for people who don't know about you. So if you could introduce yourself, your company, that would be really helpful.
Yeah, of course. My name is Martin Heubel. I used to work at Amazon for around 5 years, both in Germany as well as in the UK, taking care of various product categories and P&L responsibility for a lot of vendor negotiations in the home hardware lines sector, as well as then in the CPG space, particularly taking care of vendors in the food, snacks, and dessert space, as well as coffee. Before around 3 years ago, I transitioned into my role as an independent consultant, where I now help first-party vendors navigate and steer the waters of the kind of wavery annual vendor negotiations, but also ensure that they have a very clear-eyed view about what it takes to kind of elevate their margins on and with Amazon Vendor Central.
Excellent. So before I dive into the topic, I want to pick up something with your experience. So you've got both experience with the Amazon vendor in Germany and the Amazon vendors in the UK. Is there any difference at all?
I would say it's not a big difference from an overall process requirement setup. I mean, Amazon is really a metrics organization, so it operates fairly consistent across European markets, and even after Brexit, has very high similarities to its mainland European counterparts. So I wouldn't say there's a big difference. I think the challenge that a lot of small to medium-sized businesses have, particularly in markets like Germany, is that there can be sometimes a little bit of a language barrier, simply because Amazon is nowadays not allocating by default a vendor manager or an Amazon Vendor Service brand specialist out of the German market or out of their native market. But they can sit, for example, in the UK or also in Italy, where English becomes the default. So in my experience, sometimes, especially if you're working in a more small to medium-sized business, there were sometimes a little bit of challenges around the language barrier. But from a process requirement setup, it's literally the same.
Okay, excellent. So and also before we go into the topic, other thing we were discussing before. So you are involved in Vendor Connect, which is happening in May. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. I'm very much excited. It's on the 15th of May. I'm going to hold a dedicated presentation around the challenges, of course, that vendors are facing with Amazon right now. We're going to touch base on that in a second as well. And what areas of the business vendors really need to kind of obsess about in order to effectively improve their margins in 2024 and beyond. And we'll also host a little bit of a roundtable session where I'm going to kind of facilitate the conversation, and we are drilling down into the kind of challenges that vendors have faced when it comes to cost prices, when it comes to increasing their own minor margins, and really drill into some nice examples about how they have managed to do that. Very much looking forward to that. So tickets are still available if you are around in central London and want to kind of have a vendor exclusive experience in this event. Obviously, feel free to come by, and very much looking forward to it.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much for talking about that. So let's dive into the topic. Annual vendor negotiations, obviously it's once in a year. So what sort of theme are you seeing in 2024?
Yeah, I think very interestingly, although very many brands have thought and hoped that Amazon is finally moving more towards, again, a partnership-oriented approach, prioritizing growth and sales volume over profitability, the bleak reality that a lot of brands have faced over the last few months is that profitability and the improvement of cost to serve, so per unit economic cost for Amazon, is still very much a top priority. I recently ran a little bit of a study together with Strategly, where we kind of asked vendors about their recent experience around vendor negotiations. And without much surprise, almost 57%, slightly above, of vendors and survey respondents highlighted that they received requests for cost price decreases. And they also experienced more difficult vendor negotiations compared to the year before. primarily because vendor managers are really focused around improving their own free cash flow. So they are no longer accepting blindly the cost increase requests that a lot of CPG brands especially have tried to kind of translate into the Amazon P&L. And they're also much more consistent with applying punitive measures onto vendors that are not necessarily meeting their investment demands right off the bat. So overall, I think a very dynamic 2024 negotiation that is coming to an end, where brands also will need to kind of ensure that they're very much focused on stabilizing at least their net PPM with the online retailer over the coming months, so that they also position themselves fairly well for the upcoming trade negotiations for the year of 2025, who will usually commence around September, October time this year.
Not far then.
Not at all.
Right. Okay. So so obviously profit has been a big topic this year, everywhere, including the Seller Central side, for the retailers. So at some point, well, previously, or to my knowledge, generally when Amazon sells the product, they try and, I may be wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, they try and take the market over in some ways, what it would be possible. So profit generally is not the lot of focus, but now you're mentioning profit is becoming more focused, and is it going to continue throughout 2025, you think?
So when we are looking at the trends, particularly around Amazon's earnings, a couple of things really spring to mind, and that is that Amazon has been in this profitability cycle for over a year now. They started in 2022 to really switch their sales focus, which was very much induced by the pandemic, towards a profitability focus on their bottom line, where more frequent margin support requests, difficult AVNs, but also the rejection of any cost increases were coming to the surface. Recently, we've seen, particularly in Europe, that in certain categories, Amazon even communicates to vendors a listing preference of new items with a selling price above the €10 or 10 British pounds price point. In the US, we do not see that as much. And in Andy Jesse's recent letter to shareholders, he even kind of underlined his commitment to low ASP selection. Now, when we are looking at the overall financial performance of Amazon, then there are two key trends that we need to really understand. Before the pandemic, Amazon's capital expenditure was fairly low. It was only 6% of its overall net sales. And this has really increased during the pandemic to more than double at 13% in 2021, because Amazon opened a lot of new warehouses, because Amazon made obviously a lot of investments also in AWS to create more server farms, etc. But even in 2023, for the full year that Amazon so far reported, the capital expenditure margin is well above 9% as a percentage of its revenue measured. So we're seeing that Amazon has significant pressure to improve its overall profitability. And if you're looking at the split of the operating income that Amazon generates, particularly in its retail unit, then we see that over the last 12 months, so from the fourth quarter of 2022 to the fourth quarter of 2023, the latest quarter that Amazon reported so far, they reduced their overall losses from retail and other divisions by over 100%, now being at the point of break even. And for the first quarter, they were at this point of break even now, last quarter. And this, of course, signals to us that Amazon is very much focused on becoming less reliant on the other profit centers that Amazon relied upon so many years before, such as AWS, its cloud computing division, and advertising, and really wants to kind of put the retail division on two healthy feet. So I wouldn't say that we are going to see the profitability focus going away anytime soon. What we will see, however, is that the pressure from its Asian rivals like TikTok Shop, Temu, and Shein will, of course, bring Amazon to the point where they will have to make certain concessions, particularly to sellers around the selling fees. We see that already unfolding in apparel, for example, where Amazon has started to reduce the selling fees in those categories as a direct response to these rivals. But for vendors in most categories, otherwise, I think Amazon will pretty much keep the pressure point very high to not lose any profitability gains that they have collected as part of this year's negotiation.
Okay, so that leads down to another question for the vendors. So what what should vendor consider when this focus is continuous? What should vendor focus on for the next, say, for example, next 12 months to 40 months?
Yeah, I think when we want to really boil it down to one element is to become really aware of what is the symptom of low profitability with Amazon and what is the underlying structural defect. Now, you may look at it as, okay, we have always lost buy box. We always see that our products are being crapped, or we're seeing that our ASP declines on Amazon, and you may point fingers at them. And of course, you're more than free to do that. But I think what's more is to really understand that this is all a symptom of an underlying structural defect that leads to the symptom in the first place. It's like when you wake up with a headache and you're taking an aspirin, and you wake up with a headache again and you take another aspirin. Like, yes, you address the symptom, but you never ask and really question yourself, okay, why do I have the headache in the first place? And this is really what vendors need to obsess in 2024 and beyond on, in order to ensure that they create a little bit more of a holistic profitability plan. Now, what are those structural defects? It usually boils down to a lack of distribution control. So you sell your products to everyone, and you also give distributors and wholesalers discounts in order to kind of sell your products in even more channels because you want these sales. And sometimes it also means that you're just not aligned across European markets. So you may give Amazon a different cost price in Germany as compared to the UK, as compared to France. And as we all know, Amazon will source the product at the lowest price point. So the symptom is, yes, Amazon will cross-border source, or Amazon will have a lost buy box because those wholesalers that we've talked about just now, they may be third-party sellers themselves and try to compete with you as a vendor for the buy box. And they do that by, of course, passing on the discount to the end shopper. But you're not fixing it by giving Amazon more money to kind of win the buy box again. No, you need to address the structural defect by reviewing your incentive structures that you have with your other retailers and retail clients. And I think this is probably one of the most powerful, theoretical exercises that a brand can do right now to really uncover, okay, what is the symptom and what is the actual underlying root cause, and then to take action accordingly.
Okay, excellent. So let's move on to cost support agreement. So this seems to be an issue with a lot of vendors. So how should a brand deal with those sort of situations there?
Yeah, great question. So I think the very first point and first element that we should always be mindful about is to understand whether the cost support request is of structural nature, or if it's really just something that popped up recently and where our vendor manager now wants to collect their margin. So the kind of temporary fix would be to give Amazon a cost support agreement, yes, but this doesn't necessarily help you if you see that the margin of a certain item has structurally deteriorated. The typical example here is that you are running a rotating marketing calendar with multiple retailers, meaning that today you're running a 20% discount with Aldi, tomorrow you do it with Tesco, the next week you do it with Sainsbury's, and Amazon is matching all of these retailer promotions and becomes thereby an everyday low price retailer or EDLP retailer. So I think it really is the starting point to understand what is the root cause here. Why is Amazon asking for this cost support? And is that something that you need to address structurally, or is that something where you understand that, okay, this is just a temporary issue and will cease to exist in the next 1 or 2 weeks? I usually recommend never to kind of retroactively fund Amazon, even if you come to the point where you say, okay, we need to do something and we need to fund Amazon because otherwise we face PO suppressions, buy box suppressions, or whatnot. Rather, focus your vendor manager on the future and on a forward-looking point of view, highlighting and outlining to them that, look, you're not being able to compensate Amazon for margin, but you identify and have identified and recognized that there is a structural margin deficit to an item, and you're willing to kind of grant them a certain funding. If you do, then also limit it to a maximum of 2 to 3 weeks. Then review if this structural underlying defect still exists, and then you can negotiate with your vendor manager to extend this funding if needed. But I usually caution against this approach in its entirety, because once you're going down this cost support route, it's like a one-way street where Amazon will come back for every single ASIN that slightly performs below your net PPM average at the account level. So sometimes you also will have to make a harsher decision and say, okay, look, either you're just ignoring this request, or either we'll have to delist this item if you do not have a structural solution to it. But this will depend on the individual business case, of course. If Amazon wants it as part of your wider vendor negotiations, then make sure that you're kind of finding a more sustainable solution to it, so that you're not rolling the contract every 3 weeks for the next 12 months, but that you rather review the cost price competitiveness of those items and whether they still reflect the market reality.
Excellent. So we're towards the end of this podcast. So is there anything we're missing out with regards to the vendor negotiations for 2025?
I think there are so many things that you can talk about. I mean, with Amazon, it never becomes boring, right? Especially in vendor negotiations. I think what's interesting, and what I would always encourage brands to do very early, is to have a little bit of a review or top-to-top meeting with your vendor manager outside of the negotiation cycle, particularly in the slower summer months, because most of the times your vendor manager will already understand what their ambitions are with and for your account in 2025, so for the year to come. And this also positions you very effectively outside of the negotiation situation to position your needs and to position your view on the account and under what circumstances you are potentially willing to invest, but also to set clear boundaries that any investment needs to obviously also drive a positive return on investment for yourself. This will depend on your individual situation. Some brands will say, look, we just need the cost increase that we've already discussed last year about and didn't get through. Others will say, look, we do not care about a cost increase this year at all. What we are actually wanting to do is to kind of drive mutual cost savings in our joint supply chain. And discussing that outside of the negotiation cycle typically leads to more creative solutions, because your vendor manager is not notoriously focused on a certain net PPM target, and thereby also more open-minded to offer you the wide breadth of opportunities and different programs that Amazon itself has to offer, which then can be negotiated in the months to come when you're actually in this negotiation situation. But at least you get already an understanding and you can discuss it with your internal program and logistic teams before you're in this pressure situation of a negotiation in the first place.
Okay, excellent. So thank you again for all the suggestions, all the tips today. So if somebody wants to find you and book a call with you, where is the best place to contact
Best
you?
place is usually on LinkedIn. You can just simply find my name, Martin Heubel. That should hopefully pop right up there. Otherwise, you can also go to consulters.com, consulterce.com. This is my personal blog and website where you find all further information.
Excellent. Thanks again for your time today. All the best. Speak soon.
Thanks, Prabhat. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.